Okay, we've got these two equations here. They're simultaneous equations, meaning that we want to find the values of x and y that satisfy both equations. You know that if we graph these equations, you can find the x and y intercepts very easily. And the slopes that you get are going to be different, so the lines have to meet. And what we're then doing is finding the coordinates of the point where the two lines meet. Okay, now people have trouble getting started here, so here's a big hint. Now, there's an easier hint I could give you, but I'm going to let you think about what it would be after we do this, okay? Multiply both sides of the first equation by 2 both sides of the second equation by -5. Then add the equations. See what happens. Okay, now one thing I see is when you multiply by the left side, people are writing down something like this. 2 times 5x minus 6y equals 2 times 30. And you're multiplying the 2 by the 5x, which gives you 10x. And then you got your minus 6y equals 60. Well, that's wrong because you didn't multiply this 2 by the whole side. You should multiply both sides, not just multiply the first term on the side. And that comes down to the way you write it out. Okay? You can't write it out this way. You have to write out 2 times 5x minus 6y equals 2 times 30. 2 times the whole side. Otherwise, you're changing the solutions of the equation. Okay? If you don't double the whole side, everything gets out of balance. Now, I would write it out like this, and I would write this then. I'd write the whole system. Okay. Now something kind of weird happens here, but that really wasn't. Okay. So there we have the system. Now, let me point out, this is the system of the equation, okay? This is the same system, with this side multiplied by 2, this side multiplied by -5. Then you simplify both sides and write the entire system down again, okay? If you simplify this, you get 10x minus 12y equals 60. If you simplify this side, you get -10x minus 15y equals -60, equals 60. No, it is -60, sorry. Okay. So you got the system again. Now this system is equivalent to this system because all we've done is we've doubled everything in this system. If this side's equal to this side, then double this side has to equal double this side. And similarly, if this side equals this side, then -5 times this side has to be equal to -5 times this side. It's a very important principle. We need to understand that. Okay, well, having understood that, we just do it and there we have it, right? Now, what happens if you add these two equations? If you add the left-hand side, okay, left-hand side here is equal to the right-hand side here, and this left-hand side is equal to this right-hand side. So if I add these two left-hand sides, you got to get the same thing as if I add the two right-hand sides. Okay, so this plus this has to equal this plus this. So what do you get when you add the left-hand side of this equation to the left-hand? Well, let's do these. What do you get when you add the right-hand side to the right-hand side? Can you show me with your fingers? Yeah, you get 0. Okay. These numbers are equal and opposite. They give you 0. So that left us a lot of room to indicate what I'm doing. We add. You add both sides, okay? Now, what do you get when you add the left-hand sides? Right now, what you think you get? Okay, so we add these two equations and the x's go away. We end up the equation -27y equals 0, which has solution y equals 0. We take that 0 and we plug it into our first original equation. We could have used the second just as well, but it's easy for you to get the arrow here. Okay, and then down here, we're going to write the equation we got. Well, you're going to have equation 5x minus 6 times 0 equals 30. And that's just 5x equals 30. We divide both sides by 5. I'll just put some dots there because we know that step. And we get x equals 6. So our solution, if we've done this correctly, x and y are equal respectively to 6 and 0. I could have written them separately, x equals 6, y equals 0. I just choose to write them as coordinates of a point, because they're going to correspond to the coordinates of a point. Now we check. Okay, how do we check? We plug in 6 for x and 0 for y. We plug that into the first equation, then we plug it into the second equation and see that it gives us the same thing on both sides each time. So we plug these numbers into each equation. Can you do that and verify whether we really got a correct solution or not? Okay, so we plug 6 and 0. Okay, first equation is 5x minus 6y equals 30. We plug in 6 for x, then we're going to have 5 times 6. Plug in 0 for y, we're going to have minus 6 times 0. equals 30. So we're gonna have in the second equation, we're going to have 2 times 6 minus 3 times 0 equals 12. There's our system if x equals 6 and y equals 0. If we do the arithmetic, we get 30 equals 30, 12 equals 12. That checks it. Okay? Okay, well, take the same system and we'll write it out again. Our system is x minus 6y equals 30, 2x plus 3y equals 12. What would you multiply by which equation to eliminate y? It kind of took a little while to see this, but you weren't sure what you were looking for. Another problem that we have if the numbers get a little bigger, I don't think anybody has any difficulty seeing if we like double 3y, we get 6y, which would add up with the negative 6y to give us 0. Okay. If the numbers were like 9 and 54, with overdependence on calculators to do arithmetic, people have more trouble seeing that than would be good. So that can be a little bit of a hang up here. Yeah, there's not much I can do to remedy that. So I'm gonna have to kind of live with it if you have that problem. Okay, well, anyhow, and that you can use prime factorizations to do this. It's kind of overkill, but so be it. Okay, so anyhow, you have this. We want to write the system down, and I'm going to do something here. And I've done this before. We've done this back in chapter 2. Okay, so make sure you lock it in now. It didn't apparently lock in real well in chapter 2. It's got to lock in now, because what we're doing after Thanksgiving is all based on this. Okay. Okay, so you got one. This is equation 1, equation 2. We write the system down again. We write equation 1 and we write 2 times equation 2. Okay. So it says write equation 1. What are you going to do? You're going to write this equation. It says 2 times equation 2. What are you going to do? Probably you ought to put a 2 here with parentheses around this and a 2 here with parentheses around this to indicate and remind yourself that you're multiplying the whole side and you have to use the distributive law. Okay, so I wouldn't skip that step at this point, although after you get used to what you're doing, maybe you can skip the step. Okay. Okay. This is equation 1, right? We're just going to write down equation 1. And we're going to write it here. And we're going to write down 2 times both sides of equation 2. We're going to write that down here. Okay, not going to do anything with any other numbers. We're just going to do what it says, which is then we write out the first equation, which is 5x minus 6y equals 30. Okay, and then we write out 2 multiplied by the entire second equation, which means 2 multiplied by both sides of the second equation. Second equation is this one, so we're going to write down 2 multiplied by 2x plus 3y equals 2 times 12. And that's all we do in this step. Now we do that once we've realize that if we multiply the 3y by 2, it's going to match up with the negative 6y and give us 0, right? That's our motivation. We're trying to eliminate y. So if we do this, and then down here, we can write down our two equations. Now the 1 refers back to the equation we had previously, and the 2 refers back to the equation we had previously. We're not doing anything to 2, but we're going to simplify it. Okay, so just writing down, we're going to repeat equation 2, but we're going to use a distributive law here. We're going to multiply 2 by 12. Okay. Well, what we do in this step, and I think everybody's pretty much got it, so you don't even have to necessarily pay attention to me yet. But if you're done, go ahead and watch the brilliant way I write these out. Okay, you write the first equation. That's all this says. You write the first equation. You're repeating this equation. Okay, and you're repeating the second equation, except you're going to simplify it. You got multiplications to do. You're going to get 4x plus 6y equals 24. Now, another thing about this is I'm lining up my addition. I say I'm lining up my addition and subtraction signs. They're not very well lined up, but I'm lining up my 5x and 4x. I'm lining up my 6y and or negative 6y and 6y, and I'm lining up the equal signs, and I'm lining up the 30 and the 24. As I said to one of you, it's going to be important to be careful about that, because later on we're going to put these things into matrices. And if you have the habit of lining everything up, it's just going to make some things a little bit easier for you. Okay. Now, what we do next is we're going to add these two equations, because if I add the y's, I got a negative 6y and a 6y, I'm going to get no y. And then I'm just going to have an x equals something, okay? Or something times x equals something. So I'm going to write that out is, what am I doing to these equations? I'm adding them. How do I know that? I do equation 1 plus equation 2. And I write that down. Okay, we're writing down what we get at every step. Okay, so when we add these, it's pretty obvious. I think everybody pretty much has them added correctly. 5x and 4x gives us 9x. And of course, this is 0y, and this equals 54. So that now 9x equals 54, x equals 6. Okay. Now we plug 6 into one of the equations. Plug in for x, of course. And this gives us the equation. Five times 6 minus 6y equals 30. And we can solve this for y. We're going to get y equals 0. Not a surprise. We'll look back at what we got for the solution for the equation. When we multiplied the first equation by 2 and the second by negative 5, we got y equals 0 and x equals 6. What do we get here? Same thing, we got y equals 0 and x equals 6. So our solution is 6, 0 again. In other words, x is 6, y is 0. We don't need to check that because we already checked that solution previously. The check is going to look exactly like it did over here when we did this. I'll give you another equation. It asks you to write it out in the same format. Imitate everything I did because it's going to make your life much simpler. Okay. So go with that. You write it down, remind yourself, put a 1 here and a 2 here, and figure out what you got to do in the next step. You can choose to eliminate X or you can choose to eliminate Y. One of them is going to be easier to eliminate than the other. But neither one is going to be that difficult. Okay, now when I look at these numbers, I see that if I multiply this one by 2, I'm going to match up the 4, right? Of course, if I multiply it by -2, I'll have a -4 here, which is better. So what I'm going to do is, and pay attention here, I'm going to write down equation 1, because I'm not going to change it. I'm going to be able to manipulate this one to match up the x's so I can eliminate x. Okay. Then equation 2, I'm going to multiply equation 2 by -2. That's all I need. If I multiply 2 by -2, I get -4x. And if I multiply the 4y, well, kind of obscuring one thing, but to make another thing clear, I'm not sure what the best way to do that would be. But now I'm going to just, I got -4x minus 8y equals -32. Okay. Now, in one case, somebody wanted to make that -40 and make this +40. That's okay. You're going to get the same answer. Your numbers are just going to be 10 times as big. It's not harmful, but you do want to tend to look for the smallest numbers you can use. So this is what we get. Okay, then what am I doing? I'm adding equation 1 to equation 2. You really want to think about why I'm writing these things down the way I am, because again, there are things we've got to do with matrices that mimic what we're doing here. And if you're not clear on exactly what's being done here, if you're not clear enough to write this down, it's going to be harder for you. Okay, so trying to give you a very repetitive system. And the only thing you've got to do to apply that system is get the numbers right, figure out what number to use, but get the numbers right, and then write down what you're doing at each step. Okay. If I add these equations, the x's go away. I'm not even going to write out 0x this time. We know we're going to get 0x, like I got a 0y here, and then it just goes away. We get -13y equals -12. Okay. Which gives us y equals 12/13. Got three dots here. You should do the division. -13y over 13 equals -12 over -13 to keep reinforcing that. So I'm not including it here, but we've got that. So now we can take y equals 12/13. Plug it into most convenient equation. And we come around here, figure the line here, and we're solving for x. So we're going to have 4x minus 5 times 12/13 equals 20. What do? We have a denominator. We multiply both sides by the denominator. We do 13 times 4x minus 5 times 12/13 equals 13 times 20. We're going to get some kind of big numbers, but they're not that hard. Well, 13 times 4 is 52, so we have 52x minus, well, when we multiply something with a denominator of 13 by 13, the 13s divide out. And this gives us 5x minus I'll write it out in gory detail. We get 5 times 12, and we get a 13 over 13. 13 over 13 is just 1. We get 52x minus 60 equals 260. We add 60 to both sides. We get 52x equals 320. X is 320 divided by 52, which reduces to 80 over 13. Now, we don't have time to run through the check, and I don't have time to give you another problem to work through, but this is the format I want you to do your best to write things out in. Okay? It'll serve you better in the long run than any other thing you can do, no matter what open math might tell you to do. You can do anything that open math tells you to do with these notations. Remember that a 1 here means the previous equation 1. A 2 here means the previous equation 2. Okay? So the number always refers back to the previous step. But please do your best to follow that format. I think it'll be very beneficial for you.